It's 1 a.m. My vacuum is cleaning the house. I have a massive flu, and I find myself explaining yet again that you can't just match any stylus and any cartridge with any record player arm or with any arm. An arm has an effective mass. Yes, you can change how heavily it pushes down on the record, but it also swings laterally. And if the arm is heavy, it pulls the stylus harder, right? Makes sense. As soon as it starts resonating, it will start pulling the stylus harder. Now, there is an ideal resonance, which is between 9 and 11 hertz. You actually have test records that have that resonance on them, and you can actually see the arm go like that when that exact frequency is being played. That's how you can see whether your resonance frequency is okay. The reason for that frequency is footsteps, the boom of a footstep is about 6 hertz. Doesn't matter how fast you walk, it's just 6 hertz. You don't want it to resonate at 6 hertz because every time you'd walk by, the thing would jump out of the groove. And so that's the lower half of the frequency range. Then you have 16 hertz, which is reasonably the lowest tone you'll find in an album. It's like really big pipe organs and such. So you want records to be able to play 16 hertz because that's how low a record can go, and you don't want it to jump out of the groove when you walk by. So exactly in the middle is the ideal resonance frequency of the card arm combination. And this is achieved by having a certain suppleness of the stylus. So you have the stylus of your record player, little tip, and then you have a little tube called the cantilever. And that cantilever is usually suspended in rubber, and not always, but usually. And that has a certain stiffness, and the cantilever material itself has a certain stiffness. And depending on how stiff the stylus suspension is, that's called compliance. If it's more compliant, it's supple, and if it's less compliant, it's stiffer. Depending on how stiff that is, you can match it with a different arm. So like a medium weight arm is like 12, 13 grams effective mass. Of course, the arm's heavier than that, but you have the counterweight at the back. There's a whole formula for that I can't explain because I can't do that. Sorry, vacuum is coming in. So there is that for you can Google it usually. The effective mass of an arm can be Googled. So a really heavy arm is like 30 grams. That's super heavy. I have an EMT turntable there. That's 35 grams, which is ridiculous, and it's virtually compatible with no cartridges, which is actually an issue. I made it work, but and a very light arm, like the Infinity Black Widow, for instance, is 3 grams. That's super light. Like the really light dual arms, the ULM, ultra low mass arms, I think they were like 5 grams. I'm not sure actually, but on average, an arm is like 12, 13 grams. That's what you get with like a Technics SL1200 and such. Now there's tables of how to match these cards, and there's a little bit of leeway in it. Like with any medium mass arm, any compliance between 10 and 17, 18 maybe CU is probably fine. Some arms are more forgiving, some cards are more forgiving, right? Now compliance gets measured at either 10 hertz, 100 hertz, or static. I don't know how they measure it static, but apparently that's possible. There are formulas to calculate the difference, but you do need to check. For instance, Japanese usually measure at 100 hertz. Europeans usually measure at 10 hertz. And you need to double or half those numbers, but it's a bit more subtle than that. So you can Google that and calculate your compliance. But keep in mind, if you have a heavy arm, you want a low compliance card. If you have a light arm, you want a high compliance card. If you put a high compliance card in a heavy arm, so a supple card in a heavy arm, or supple stylus actually, the arm will actually start swinging the card so violently that the stylus will snap off. It won't do it immediately, but it will. It also sounds like shit because it can't really, it gets restless. It just keeps wobbling and swinging, and you just get very sloppy low end and thin highs and lacking mids. It's a really unpleasant sound. That said, what's even more unpleasant is a really stiff stylus in a light arm, because you just don't get a resonance anymore. And everything just sounds dead, and you mostly get mid-range, and I'm getting an email from my supermarket for some reason. You mostly get mid-range. It's a really ugly sound. Now, it doesn't hurt your stylus. So if you get like a DJ cartridge, which is really low compliant because it needs to be able to handle a thing or two, right? And also high vertical tracking force, so high pressure. If you put that in a super light arm, it won't hurt anything. It may skip a bit more often, okay, but it won't hurt the stylus. It will just sound like absolute crap. But what you mostly see people do is get high compliance cards like Orthophone's 2M, which is they don't say that. They say it's a multi-purpose card pretty much, but it's pretty high compliant. Careful with that one. Or they get like a Shure V15 or 97E, whatever it's called. These are all high compliance cards, 20, 25 CU, right? I don't even know what CU is, to be honest. I'm really not very good at physics or maths or anything like that. I just sort of know how the system works, right? I also know how camera lenses work. I don't know how it works on a physics basis. I just know how to work with it. So don't ask me that. I just know that you really have to match your card and your arm carefully. You can Google all this. You can see where the sweet spot is, and you want to get it right. Both for the sake of your sound quality and for the sake of your stylus longevity. So make sure you get that right. Make sure you figure it out before you spend money on a card, because I've seen so many people either spend money on a card that was too high compliant and then ruining it, or just it sounded like shit. They often don't notice because they spent money, so they think it sounds good. That's unfortunately how it works. But what I've also seen is people who are like, oh, I got this cheap Audio-Technica record player and it's kind of nice, but I know there's an upgrade cartridge for it. Audio-Technica always puts the AT3600 cartridge. It's a very common cartridge. It's an OEM. Audio-Technica calls it the AT91, and the AT3600 is the one they sell with other record players. You see it on Sony's, on Philips's, on many cheap, top of stereo system record players from the 80s and 90s. The AT3600 is a very low compliance cartridge, or a very low compliance stylus. It's called the AT3600L. It has a white body. It's very easy to recognize because it's white with an Audio-Technica logo on it. And it's super low compliant and meant for heavy arms. And then people are like, oh, but it's a conical stylus, so it's just round, it's not very precisely cut. I'm going to get an elliptical stylus. That will sound much better. The stylus is better. So you get the E stylus then, so not the L but the E. Stylus is better, but the compliance is completely different. All of a sudden you have a medium compliance cartridge, and these sort of unsubtle arms that they put in these cheap record players, they're pretty heavy. Like, they're simple plastic things with the weight all the way at the back. And they swing pretty hard, and you don't want a supple stylus for that. So bear in mind, compliance is important. Do a little research. I can't tell you what to buy. I can't be like, oh, you make this combination and that. It's not that simple, but it's worth investing in because, first of all, longevity. Second of all, sound quality. You're paying for an upgrade. May as well get an actual upgrade. Take care.